Well, Shahram, folks, is a former Muslim. If you don't remember, he was born and raised in Iran. His daddy was a high-ranking military official in Iran, and they left Iran, escaped Iran, fled Iran 6 weeks before the fall of the Shah. Well, Shahram, it's very sad what took place in Orlando, but we've had this now take place in San Bernardino, California, and now in Orlando. We've had the Fort Hood massacre. I mean, we have many of these. We had a lady that was beheaded in Oklahoma. I think this is going to become more and more commonplace. And frankly, before all of that, we were predicting that at this news desk with our friend Usama Dakdok. But I have to really wonder, what is the purpose of government, folks? It's security and protection, right? It's security and protection. The purpose of government is not to be a welfare state where we redistribute the wealth. Many of you today got up and you worked very, very hard at your job. Or perhaps you're at your job right now and you're working very hard. Maybe you're listening to this program either through a smart device or maybe you're listening to the audio later. But you work hard and you pay your taxes. And your taxes should go toward security and protection. But sadly, most of us who get up and work, our money goes toward people who don't want to work. Able-bodied people who do not want to work. Notice I said able-bodied people who don't want to work. And now today, even the stigma of welfare or food stamps is gone, and now they just swipe a card, just like a credit card, so nobody has to know. And about 48% of the American public is now on some kind of government entitlement program. That's not the purpose of government. It's security and protection. And yet our own government seems unwilling to protect us. Earlier this week, 2 days ago, I had Shahram on my radio program, and I posed three things. We have three things going on here, folks. We either have a government that is run by a bunch of Barney Fives with their one bullet in their pocket, and they're absolutely clueless, a bunch of Barney Fives running around who are clueless. That's number one option. Number two option is that these folks are good people but are not being allowed to do their job. They're good people at the lower levels of the government, good FBI agents who want to do their job, but they're not being allowed to do their job because the elite, the rulers, the leaders, the administration of these agencies are politically correct. And so people don't want to speak up and say truth because they don't want to be politically incorrect and lose their job and their retirement. So group one, it's either option one, they're Barney Fives, Keystone Cops, don't know what they're doing. Two, they don't want to speak truth and be politically incorrect and offend anyone, lose their job and their pension and retirement. Option three is we actually have people in our government, the higher levels of government, that want this to happen. They want chaos in order to fundamentally transform America. And so they're not doing anything about this. Case in point, here's a headline. The right scoop. Government fail. Terrorist shooter Omar Matin had been investigated by the FBI twice. Investigated twice. Can someone tell me, since ISIS telegraphed this attack in Florida, they actually telegraphed it 3 days in advance and said they were going to attack Florida, why this man wasn't being interviewed, why he wasn't being watched by the FBI, by the HD Homeland Security? Maybe even FBI could have tipped off local police and they could have gone and interviewed him or been watching him. They investigated him twice. He also had a security clearance to carry a gun, concealed gun with a special license to carry it places normal people could not carry it. So don't be talking about gun control and gun legislation. This man had been screened by the FBI like everybody else. He gets a handgun permit or a concealed carry permit. I'm sure he'd been screened by them because he had an advanced carry permit, was working as a security guard. And so this has nothing to do with gun legislation or limiting guns. This has to do with common sense. Why was he not had his gun permit taken? Why did they not alert the security company he supposedly worked with at one time? Why were they not watching him, particularly with a 3-day notice by ISIS that they were going to attack in Florida? So why was not everyone who was on the watch list or had been watched in Florida being watched at that moment? Here's another one. Texas jihad attack exposes FBI failure. This is the folks that attacked in Garland, Texas, I believe it. They too had been on the watch list or had been known about the FBI. How is it these people that keep making these attacks, the FBI knew about them? Here's one. Pre-9/11 missteps by the FBI. The inability to detect the September 11, 2001 hijack plot amounts to a significant failure by the FBI and was caused in large part by, quote, widespread and long-standing deficiencies, end quote, in the way the agency handled terrorism and intelligence cases, according to a report released yesterday. And this was from 2005. Seems like the problem hasn't been fixed. Here's another one. FBI admits it missed opportunities to stop the Tamerlan Tesnarev brothers. Remember these Boston bombers? They were also on the radar. This is coming from the Boston Mag, April 11th, 2014. A government report released on Thursday sheds new light on the failures of federal law enforcement officials to recognize these brothers as a potential source of terrorism in the years before the Boston bombing. The document, unclassified summary report from the Inspectors General of the Central Intelligence Agency, the Department of Justice, and the Department of Homeland Security, calls particular attention to an FBI interview of Tesnarev in 2011 and the failure of a Boston agent of the Joint Terrorism Task Force to follow up on an automated alert that Tamerlan was leaving the country for Dagestan. I mean, how many failures do we have to keep having? Here's another one. Whistleblower. Fed shut down terror investigation that could have prevented San Bernardino. So I'm going to have Sharam mention all this because this is quite shocking. By the way, here's another one. This is from Counter Jihad. Has ISIS infiltrated Homeland Security? Orlando terrorists worked for a major DHS contractor. So question again is, 1, Barney Fives, clueless, Keystone Cops. 2, people who don't want to speak up because they'll lose their job or pension, or they've been told to sit down and shut up. Option 3, we have people at the high levels of our government that want this to happen. Sharam, which of the 3 is it?
Well, Brannon, I feel pretty strongly about this, and it's just incredible when you go through this list. It just incenses you, doesn't it? As a former police officer who has friends in law enforcement or former law enforcement, it just incenses me. I think it's number 2 and number 3. I have personally talked to those within counterterrorism, including federal and local, but specifically federal, within the FBI, a colleague of mine within Homeland Security, who has communicated to me how much their hands are tied, how much they are being threatened or are under pressure to not bring or go against their narrative of this administration that we don't want to target Muslims. And yet, according to the FBI, according to my source in the FBI, close to 95% of their investigations are dealing with Muslims when they deal with counterterrorism. So I think there's an aspect of it that's number 2, but I fully believe that there is an aspect that is number 3, that this is intentional and this is criminal and this is treasonous. Because when you have case after case after case, as you well pointed out, whether it was the Tsarnaev brothers, where, as you said, we should have known they left the country and came back after visiting the Chechen region, working with Chechen rebels and those that are jihadists, whether it was a situation with Garland, Texas, where FBI informants knew that the 2 guys, particularly one of the guys, was tied to a mosque in Phoenix, that later an informant said they had a shooting range underneath that mosque that they were training. You see in this case in Orlando, Brannon, where not only was this guy tied to the mosque in the Islamic Center there in Orlando in Fort Pierce area, that the imam of that mosque had a pretty troubling background, potentially with Al-Qaeda. But the second time that the FBI approached Mateen was when there was another guy named Salah who was the first American suicide bomber that they worked with ISIS in Syria. I mean, what are the odds that you have 2 jihadists, this guy and the other guy from Syria that went to Syria, at the same mosque? And yet the reason the FBI cannot investigate these guys is because of top-down intimidation, pressure, threats, and it being intentional. I don't buy the narrative. Look, I agree with you that there's an element that they're overworked. I just saw a report today that says there's over 1,000 cases the FBI has of potential ISIS individuals or cells. So they're obviously overworked. But as you said in this case, when they got the tip, and that was well known on the internet 3 days before this attack, that there was going to be an attack. ISIS has said we're going to carry out an attack in Florida. If the FBI was too busy, contact local law enforcement. Get the local law enforcement, the sheriff's department, some detectives on this guy, keeping eyes on him, keeping a track of his activity, making a contact with him to see what's going on. Brannon, they had interviewed this guy, and this guy had said I welcome the FBI coming to my house so I can die fighting them in jihad. He had obviously made comments to coworkers who had complained. And as you said, he worked for this company, G4S, that contracted with Homeland Security, transporting potentially illegals, meaning those who they catch across the border, doing security. By the way, the company, this G4S company, does security for nuclear facilities in the United States. Now, I'm not saying that this guy was connected specifically. So the FBI says we did not, we're not able to flag his background check when he went to purchase these guns because they had closed the investigation. Had that initial 2013 investigation, or the second time they investigated and been open, they would have flagged him, and there's no way he would have gotten the permit or the permission to, one, buy the guns or have that special license to carry these guns across state lines. So there's no way this is Barney Fife. This is either number 2 or, in my opinion, for sure, number 3. And when you see Obama come out, and Brannon, did you see what happened today?
Mm-hmm.
The DHS came out, Obama had a press conference and said, now we're going to make gun control a matter of national security because they can't get it passed through Congress, and his executive orders haven't quite worked in diminishing the American people from buying more guns to defend their own lives when law enforcement is not able to protect us. And now they're talking about that as a matter of national security, we may just have to enact gun control. This is their new tactic now. So this is so dangerous, and in my opinion, it is playing right into their plan to incite, to bring about these events that would cause there to be unrest, riots. We have all these anarchists in the streets that we know a lot of them are paid, surrogates of George Soros, that they're trying to destabilize. And so there's no doubt in my mind that it's intentional, but it is criminal and it is treasonous. And God help us if there was somebody that actually had the guts in Congress or maybe the next president that can actually go after these people and charge them with treason for what they've done to this nation.
Well, when you mention criminal and treason, I mean, just take the man in California that had the information that could have stopped the San Bernardino attacks. Tell me about that.
Well, the whistleblower was a guy named Phil Haney. Phil Haney was one of the original members of establishing Department of Homeland Security after 9/11. His job was basically to put intel together, and so he would put the dots together and was an analyst, and he was really good at it. He was investigating the specific movement, a particular sect within Islam called the Deobandi movement, which basically is tied to Wahhabism. It's tied to a very strict interpretation of Islam. They want to go back to 7th century Islam under Muhammad. And so that's why, if you remember, Tashfeen Malik and the Farouk Syed, the two shooters within the San Bernardino attacks, they had gone back to Saudi Arabia. There was visits there. By the way, this shooter, right, twice he left the country.
And who was his father? Who's his father?
Well, his father is a guy that ran for president in Afghanistan and actually had pledged his allegiance to the Taliban. There's another red flag.
And where's he living now? Where's he live now?
He lives in Florida. My understanding, he lives in the United States in Florida.
But he ran for president in Afghanistan.
Exactly. And so he comes out now and says, oh, no, I deny those things. But there's videos of him online giving his allegiance to the Taliban, support for the Taliban in Afghanistan. This is the same Taliban that brutalized people, right? That Al-Qaeda was an offshoot of. So you have that connection. You have the connections to other areas. Well, going back to Phil Haney was told, he was investigating the Deobandi movement, and he was told by the Office of Civil Rights of DHS and State Department that you need to shut down your investigation. He said, no, I will not. They come in, and not only, Brannon, do they shut down his investigation, they delete or destroy, I should say is a better word, all of the evidence that he had accumulated. And then he testified before Congress December of 2015, and in an open letter said, I believe my investigation would have led to these two shooters because we were tracking this mosque that they were connected with, particularly the husband. And that he said they destroyed it because they did not want to violate the civil rights of these foreign nationals. Can you imagine the lunacy that the Office of Civil Rights or the State Department, and you know this is coming from Obama and the White House, that we don't want to violate the rights of foreigners over protecting American citizens, and 14 people are dead? The blood is on their hands, and this is criminal conspiracy. Because if they destroy evidence in an investigation that would have led to stopping murders, that's criminal conspiracy. So this is what we're dealing with, and this is what some of the good guys on the ground are dealing with. Because the fact is that there are some good guys in there, but their hands are tied, and the orders are coming from the top. And I believe that it is absolutely intentional and, again, criminal. It's unfathomable what's happening.
Absolutely. Did you?